How do you find the red flags in a hire?
I think like how they interact with other teams and cross-functional teams is a very, very telling sign.
I always say don't ignore recruiters when you get into a role, because if you're helping them out when you're not looking, they'll help you out either when you're looking or when you're hiring.
Oftentimes I've hired people that have more of that than someone who actually has like a paper resume example.
Kind of wrapping up, how do you make talent that you hire successful?
It's kind of just finding out like where the gaps are of these individuals and making sure that you've got their back and you're giving them specific examples to kind of round out their career. My philosophy is you're only as successful as the team you build and the team that's around you.
Welcome to How I Hire, the podcast where we talk with senior leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow go-to-market talent. I'm Andy, founder of Whispered. Today, I'm joined by Ghazi Masood. Ghazi recently wrapped a great run as CRO at Retool, a company I love and been following for a while. He has experience leading enterprise sales, channel alliances, and broader GTM functions at companies like Auth0, Microsoft, and Oracle. I've really respect how Ghazi thinks about PLG, and so excited to dive in. Hey, Ghazi, thanks so much.
Yeah, good to catch up and get to chat.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this. I loved you on the podcast with Sophie, GTM Now, and I was excited to go deeper on your philosophies on hiring. So excited to dive.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So you know PLG. You've done it at a couple great companies. I'm curious, like, where do companies think differently about executive hiring within PLG?
Yeah, I think it varies by role, right? So if I kind of look at like my leadership team, I think the roles that are relevant to like PLG experience and especially like also morphing from PLG to SLG, which most companies do, are like RevOps. I think RevOps is a very, very critical role, and having someone in that seat that has experience in like, PQLs, MQLs, the inbound funnel and the outbound funnel, working very, very closely with marketing is like super, super important. I think the global head of sales development, the team that does inbound and outbound prospecting, BDRs and SDRs. I think that role is like extremely relevant of people that have experience in PLG and that have actually transitioned from PLG to SLG. And then also sales leadership, right? Sales leadership in, building a machine and a team where I think, depending on the segment, you can have a good portion of the segment be inbound in PLG. But what a lot of companies want to go do is as they start going up market and into, very regulated industries, they want to develop a much more intentional enterprise outbound focus. So having some experience there, I think is super, super important too.
I love it. I've been around a lot of companies that are PLG. I've advised a lot. I haven't actually been in them as deeply as you have. So I've got a couple questions on this. First, I love that you shouted out RevOps. My observation, I'd be curious yours, almost every amazing PLG company I see over 100 million has some of the smallest RevOps resourcing out there. I think it maybe is because they don't need as much routing, they don't need as much commission comp planning, and they're able to do it differently. But I'm curious, like it seems endemic to me. I mean, I've hung out with a number of companies that are over $100 million in revenue, and they have like a 1 or a 2 person RevOps team. How do you think about that?
I think that's true. I think it also comes around the maturity and the trajectory where the company wants to go. Like, do they see going to 200 million, 500 million all through their inbound funnel, or do they want to layer on outbound? I guarantee you, getting to 500 million and $1 billion, very few companies can do that all through inbound in PLG, right? It's at some point in their journey, you have to think about outbound and SLG and being more intentional, and that involves building out the RevOps functions and having dedicated, people that are accountable for systems, that are accountable for tool, that are accountable for aligning with sales ops, marketing ops, customer success ops, and partner ops. So over time, it can morph, but early on, if you're getting most of your business and you've grown mostly internally from PLG, yes, that's a true statement. Usually RevOps teams are pretty skinny.
Yeah, they are. It's always surprised me. I'm like, that would be the one area where its data becomes almost more important. Maybe a fun tangent for a second. Like, as a CRO, a leader at PLG companies, I've seen a lot of companies that, especially right now within this era of AI and rapid growth, I've seen a lot of companies getting very big, very fast without an SLG or even a B2B, conversion funnel. I think there are a handful of companies out there that have just never crossed over to figure out how to sell their, they could sell $100 million of it in PLG, but they can't sell it to B2B companies. Like, what would you look for to evaluate if a company can be successful going from PLG to conversion/SLG?
Yeah, well, I think it's early traction in customer conversations, right? Like if you look at a lot of these AI companies and companies, you've seen them online where they've gone from like 1 to 100 million or 200 million with, literally just all inbound. I think that's great trajectory of how, and that's the proof and testament of how good the product is, right? The product is so good that it's being adopted by a wide variety of users out there. I would bet to say that if you did some product intelligence on who's actually signing up for the product, there's a lot of enterprise companies signing up for that product. And again, it may not be enterprise wide, but there's probably like a user in a team at like JP Morgan and Chase that signed up for a small product. So how do you harness that and figure out like what they're going to go do and build emotion around that? So I think that's just one idea that's kind of there that I think a lot of these companies will eventually want to go do. And I mean, listen, at the end of the day, like I think the success of a lot of these companies is like, who can actually crack the enterprise and who actually has the most credible enterprise solution out there. I think consumer and PLG is definitely good, and you want to kind of get hands on keyboard and get people and build that global community. I think that's extremely important. But
Yeah.
you also want to get into larger, more sophisticated type deals, right? Whether that's building out a good, robust channel motion, whether that's being more intentional of like the PQL funnel and what are product signals in the product that will actually tell you what a customer is doing. I think there's a lot of just gaps there that I think a lot of these companies haven't built out. It's like, hey, if an example would be, you have a customer there, irrespective of size, if they've engaged in 20 support tickets in a matter of a few weeks, they're probably building something pretty savvy. You probably want to go swarm them and figure out what they're trying to go do, right? Or things like that. So definitely a big opportunity.
I love it. I'm actually hanging out with a $100 million PLG company with no no B2B yet
Yeah.
tomorrow. So I'm going to spend
Oh,
some time
nice.
with them. And we'll talk about offline who that is. But one kind of maybe more question on this. I think it's like IT, selling to IT, where IT kind of rolls up the budgets, obvious use case. Selling to developers, another one where they're used to spending a ton of money, even in the enterprise scenario. But I've always wondered on those other buyers, right? Like PLG, but for different types of things. Like, is it designer, which obviously Canva's worked out and figured out really, really well. Do you think, and in the B2B world, I also think about this too, right? Like doctors, lawyers, teachers, I always try not to sell because they're difficult. Do you think about like the buyer personas when you think about success for PLG?
For sure. I think in this day and age, right, the whole idea, the promise with AI is to actually have non-STEM builders go out and build applications, right? Like previously, you had to be a developer and an engineer to go out and code and build an app. That's not true anymore, right? You can be a non-STEM builder and go out and effectively build apps. And you want to go encourage that. And a lot of those are inbound, right? You could have somebody in the HR department come in and download a solution, a native AI action solution, start building. You could have somebody like in RevOps that's downloading a solution. I think the idea is you want to start planting seeds, right? Of like, hey, what more can you do if you're, like if you're in RevOps, these are the top 20 things that have an immediate ROI and an immediate impact to your business, leveraging AI and plant seeds out there. I think that's where these citizen developers or the non-STEM builders, they struggle. They have an idea and they can go build, but after they build it, they kind of stop on like what more they can actually go do. So planting seeds with them and giving them things to go do and relevant examples, I think there's a huge opportunity there.
I think you're right. We're all becoming developers. We're all becoming IT departments in theory, right? Like that's maybe what AI unlocks for us.
Right. I mean, I play with these tools all the time, and I've built some amazing things just for my daily life that I could never do because I don't know how to code, right? I don't know how to go code, but I can go use one of these tools and actually get a pretty good production ready application that actually meets my needs, which is like amazing.
I love that. I've played with Retool. I've played with Lovable. I've played with all of these tools, and now I've hit my walls many times on them as well too. Okay. You mentioned two other kind of like when we talked about like PLG characteristics for hiring. One was the SDR BDR concept. One thing we were talking about before we hit record was the idea of like, do you grow your own,
Yep.
or do you hire? And then if you hire externally, what profiles do you do, and how do you how do you think about growing your own within the SDR/sales function?
Yeah, I think from the BDR role specifically, I think it's very important to have like a BDR career progression track, because these are usually young people out of college that are, getting their feet wet in sales and business development, and they want to go out and actually, prove themselves and actually be eligible for like the next role. And usually that next role ends up being like an account executive, but for a smaller segment of the market, right? For small business or like mid-sized customers. So I think the BDR to small business and mid-market or commercial, if you will, I think I'm a big, big proponent and fan of having that be like an internal flywheel. And that helps with ramp time. That helps with just, people who actually know the product and the capabilities there because they've done it, and actually helps accelerate. And usually in that segment, there's a lot of volume, right? Like in small business and mid-market, a lot of these companies have a lot of volume there. So I think for that role, having like an internal career progression is like super, super important. The big question mark becomes, hey, you're going to go build a strategic account team that's going to go sell to Amazon, Netflix, Coinbase, and others, right? That's where you need to have some readiness triggers of figuring out like, hey, who from the commercial team is actually ready and enabled to go serve that side of the market? Because, that's a whole different motion of multi-threading, navigating procurement, business value selling and things like that. And there's definitely some people there internally that can go do that. But usually what I find is that usually tends to be a role where it's hybrid, where there's a lot more like external hires and people like internally that just need more time to bake in their role before they're ready to kind of take that jump.
I couldn't agree more. We did that at Culture Amp where we took it from 5 to 150 really quickly, 5 million to 150 million in ARR. And we had that just out the inbound flow working. And we were constantly able to grow our own SMB and mid-market AEs, but we definitely found that we needed to hire externally on that
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you on that.
Yeah.
How do you think about enablement for your folks as well too?
Extremely important, especially in hypergrowth. Like, one relevant example would be at Auth0, when we literally, when we had nailed our ICP and we knew that we were really a solution for every single segment out there, we stepped on the gas and said, hey, we need to just go, 10x our sales organization, and we had to go do a lot of hiring, right? And not just sales, if you don't once you hire AEs, you got to hire more SCs, you got to hire more CSMs and TAMs and more BDRs. So I think enablement is really, really important. I think enablement in a technical sale is even more important when you're actually selling to developers and engineers. So we actually rolled out a very, very robust onboarding curriculum based by role, where we would actually have role play certifications. People would have to actually get certified in their pitch, present as a new hire. And that was just really good from an enablement standpoint. And it would tell us the people who would actually do really, really well when they would actually hit the street. So big, big fan of enablement. And I think it's in any sort of hyper growth and rapid growth organization where you're hiring that fast, you will miss a beat if you don't have good enablement in place.
I couldn't agree more. I've lived in places where it's been great and where it's been terrible. And when you've smelled great enablement, then you kind of have this pattern recognition of what is it and what is it not, for sure. Okay, shifting over maybe to senior roles, like how we talked before we recorded on your philosophy on like, hey, you don't always post senior roles. I'd love to have you click in a little bit more there.
Yeah, I think senior roles, like my philosophy there is to work with people you worked with before, or you work with people either, through your network or through like one layer down to somebody else's network, where you have good relevant work examples of that individual and their track record of success. That's usually how I've built like senior leadership roles. Very rarely is it someone that is like a unknown entity or that kind of comes into the business. Usually it's someone that I've actually had, experience, or someone I know has some good things to actually go say about that person to go fill that role. That's usually how I like to staff them.
So does that mean that they have worked with you before, or they're coming through people you respect? Because at some point, like what I found is those great people that I nurture and grow, sometimes the timing's not right. They're
For
moving
sure.
on to different things, or they've grown so senior that you can't afford to hire them anymore.
For sure. Yeah. It doesn't always work out, right? I mean, so yes, ideally it would be somebody you worked with before.
Yeah.
Ideally that would be like profession number one, somebody you worked with before and you're trying to get them over and timing works out and it's great. If that doesn't happen, then you usually ask them for like a referral. Go, hey, great. It's not going to work out for you for a variety of reasons. Anyone else you kind of know in your network that that you've had a good track record there? And usually they'll come up with a few names there. And then you can back channel and reference check them and usually end up hiring them. I think that's kind of the model.
Any things you do to kind of nurture that Ghazi network? The people, because it's like I think about it and I try to always help those people and bring them along. But what you're talking about here is this is the core engine for your team's growth. And if you're hyperscale, you're gonna need a lot of these people. And you're gonna want those people always thinking of you first when they think of high talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think like for me, I think just staying close to my network, right? Or like letting them know where I'm going, what move I'm making, where I'm at. I think just being visible in front of them, I think is important. But timing is also relevant, and also I think the company's different too. Like sometimes where if you go to a company that's a lot different, the individual you may have worked with at a previous company, they're not a good fit just from a product perspective. So it doesn't always work out,
Yeah.
but I think just hiring from your own network or someone else's network is definitely important. And even like VCs, right? Like, venture capital firms and their talent teams, they usually have a good, they usually have a good data point on people, their track record and what they've done. I think just going out and kind of trusting their judgment is also a very, very good idea.
I love that you highlight that one. We worked with about 50 talent teams. I've just been so impressed with the quality of what they do. I mean, most of their jobs are, I talked to one at one firm recently. His job is to spend time with 400 CROs and just get to know them intimately, understand where they are and when they're moving. And every time a talent firm does a background check on somebody, it's real. I don't know if you've ever seen those ones from some of the top firms,
Yeah,
but it's just like, wow, they really, really,
we do.
really spending time, not just sourcing, but vetting and understanding who's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Super, super helpful.
Yeah, they are. I think a number of companies underutilize their talent teams.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like a lot of the companies I was at, we just grew so fast that we ended up with so many investors. And then you get to a point when you don't end up having a single talent team and you have to build it on your own. If you can't find somebody through your network, how do you go about it? Is it just, did you just kind of keep asking your network versus posting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the people through your network, right? Like, the people you worked with before, if you don't know, the recruiters you worked with before, you just kind of go to different functions and team members, reach out to the search partners that I've had a relationship with over the years. I get 7-8 pings a week of roles and building relationships with search partners, not just VC search partners, but just search partners in general,
Mhm.
tapping into their network as well. So usually like collectively through that, you will get a name. I mean, so I think it's just really, really important to keep your network warm and being engaged in your network, where you're kind of in front center and visible to them. So when you do reach out and you ask for a favor, they're there ready to kind of respond to you.
Yeah, that's a good one. I always say don't ignore recruiters when you get into a role because it's not a transactional thing. What you ideally want to do is build relationships with those top 20 to 30
That's right.
recruiters slash firms, because if you're helping them out when you're not looking, they'll help you out either
Yeah,
when you're looking or when you're hiring. And there's a lot
totally.
of
Yeah,
scratch.
and it's like it's the simple economies of scale, right? Like I, as a senior leader, I know a lot of people. If you go look at a senior leader that works at a sales company and he or she has been there for 5-6 years, they know a lot of people. So I think it's just kind of maximizing the economies of scale and using our collective network to actually get names there. There's a lot of good talent out there, and it's just leveraging that and tapping into that. I think is important.
Were there I always talk about nodes, right? Like for me, Box was a node. It was world class, incredibly well run, great group of people. They always talk about
Yep.
the PayPal mafia. Was there a node for you, or two that really, because if you just work at no name companies or you don't build those networks and work with other great people, you don't have those people to source when you need them. So was there a spot in your career that opened it all up for you?
I would say like odd zero was we had like the best culture. We had the best culture from the start. And even as we grew bigger, even before the acquisition, when we were like 700-800 employees, we had just really, really good culture. Everybody on the team was like really, really good. We expanded our network of board members constantly on the team as we got bigger. So the board members that I had a relationship with when we were smaller, as we grew larger, more board members kind of came into the mix and building relationships with them. I think that was a huge asset as well. And that would like the odd zero mafia. I mean, that's out there right now. I think people, if you actually go look at it, like any of us would work with each other any given day of the week because we have something very, very special there.
I love that. That's the same thing. If somebody from Box comes, I just know how amazing they were to work for, and it's just this high caliber. What made the culture so special, and what have you tried to bring with you
I think
to Retool?
it was kind of just this work hard, play hard mentality, right? I think if you look at the BDR team and our commercial team, everyone was running in the right direction when they're at the office. But when 5 o'clock hits, you're out there going to Top Golf and on bowling and something like that with your peers. You're hanging out on the weekends. I think establishing those bonds was like really, really good. We also did these annual offsites. We did them every year up until we got big, in like, the tropical locations like Panama City, Cancun, Cabo, and things like that, which was a company-wide offsite from an annual.
Those are company-wide rather than SCO type
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. And those, I think, were like game changers for us early on in fostering culture early on. And again, you can't do those when you become really, really big from a cost perspective. But I think just early on when we did those were like game changing things.
At Culture Amp, we flew everybody in the company to Melbourne, Australia for a week. Early, maybe at like 40 million in revenue, and it was a trip. There's some interesting stories behind that one for sure.
Yeah,
But yeah,
even now, I would say like the offshore folks, if you talk to them, a lot of us talk about the offsites. That we're actually there, that we're part of them. We have stories to tell from the offsites and good stories. You're just hanging out with people. So I think that was a huge, huge component of fostering our culture too.
Okay, so if I'm somebody that I believe I'm talented, but I'm not in your sphere, your network, how do I find you? How do I break through? So I'm kind of the advice for the call it
Yeah.
like a director level sales leader. I mean, they've got to be good enough to begin with, but how do they get through to you?
I think it would like name dropping, some people, whether it's a customer or a partner or a VC or somebody there that has a connection, even though they don't know me, hey, I got your name from so and so. And I think that goes a long way in my book of like how they actually reached out to me and like why. I do think like track record and experience of someone who's like persistent. I mean, I get a lot of interesting things online on LinkedIn, of people going out and doing it. And, some are pretty compelling, where they actually have results and data to support and prove their weight in actually what they've actually done. So I think it's good. But I still think even with those, you might get into a conversation, but I think doing your own diligence on reference checking and back channeling, I think is like really, really important too.
Yeah, that kind of leads us right into back channeling, right? So somebody drops your name, you're immediately pinging them and saying, hey, so-and-so said that they came from you. If it's not good, I presume that's just an immediate shutdown, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, back channeling, I can't tell you is just, you never want to burn bridges. It's a small industry and it's a small group, and tech sales, it's a small community, and chances are you're going to run into people there. So yes, reference checking is bad, and I can't tell you how many times we've actually had offers out of people that have started, and somebody gets out of the blue, reference, hey, somebody proactively reached out and said XXX about this person, and it kind of gives you pause before you actually pull the trigger.
Have you ever pulled one back that's already started, or at that point you're just going to watch and see how they perform? I assume.
No, I haven't pulled one back of somebody who started and letting go, but we have pulled like offers away that we've delivered an offer they haven't really started yet, and something kind of comes bad, and that's just an open discussion. Not a lot. I wouldn't say it happens all the time, but in my 3 decades, that definitely has happened once or twice.
To your point on don't burn bridges, I mean, I think we all have to be effective. I think you have to be pretty direct, and you have to force trade-offs, and you can't make everybody happy all the time. Otherwise, you end up being that person. It's like, I'll do that, and then nothing's ever coming out of you. If you back checked me, you would find one person that I just did not respect, and I don't think respected me, and I'm fine with that, right? And it's like, how do you weight the good versus the bad, right? Because can one bad one sink somebody, or is it more like, okay, now I'm going to click in further?
I think it's that. I think it's getting into context. I think it's getting the context behind it. There's we all have had that one challenging peer and or subordinate that it has been challenging to work with in our careers, and that person, you reach out to that person, they're going to give you a bad reference on it, but there's usually context behind that story. Oftentimes. So kind of just hearing that broader context from the candidate, I think goes a long way.
I guess it's also too like, who you're back channeling it with. If you're channeling it with somebody you really know and trust, like you know that they're going to have a filter in a certain way, as well.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and yet, when in the process do you back channel people? I think it's like some people will. I'll see some people get on the phone right away, or like checking in with people, like, and then there's other people who will wait until they've gone down that road and they're one of their top two candidates. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I like for senior executive hires that are like in my direct reporting structure, I like to start back channeling kind of right away. And if you kind of hear something that may be a red flag and whatnot, it kind of just helps with time management. So you're not wasting a bunch of time in circles, kind of going down the path where it's not going to work out. So I like to do it like right away. Usually with some of the other roles, um, it comes later in stage. But my philosophy is just the quicker and faster you can do it, the better.
I agree in a lot of ways if they're close references and you can pick, if it's somebody close. But I've also, I mean, in the last 2 weeks, I've talked to two executives at unicorns that have been blown up quietly. Look, not they've not been whispered members. We try to help people on that, but it's like I have talked to two people and been like, oh man, I engaged with this company. I'm like, maybe you shouldn't have engaged with that company. And they're like, yeah, I know. It got back to my CEO. And so, I give people the ability to do that, but if you back channel too early, you can, and you're also assuming that most of the good candidates are in role or recently departed or stuff like that. I feel like any of the in role people, like, how do you handle that in a sensitive way?
Yeah, I've been sorry. It's a challenging thing, right? I mean, it's usually if they're in role, I think you have to be very delicate of how you do it, or don't do it at all. Maybe do it at a different company because sometimes they're probably interviewing kind of in confidence, and you don't want to jeopardize their confidence in that. So I do think you have to be careful in the way you do it. And usually, like my experience is, if they're interviewing in confidence at a company they're still working there, maybe that's not the company you back channel with. You kind of go to the
Yeah.
previous company, right?
Like, yeah, you basically have to, unless you know somebody really well, you have to go to the prior company or two. Any favorite interview questions that you've got?
Oh God. For me, like when I interview, I just like to get concrete examples. Like if I'm interviewing a sales leader or salesperson or director, I'll ask about deals they've done. I'll ask about like, hey, who did you actually sell to? Who was the decision maker? Or, how did you navigate procurement? And actually see, if they can actually off the top of their head kind of rattle that off, or if they're actually struggling with it, if the good ones actually know really, really well. So I like to get like relevant, credible examples of role. Like, hey, show me a time or give me a time that you've actually done X, X, and X. When you've actually lost a deal, how you've done it. When you've had a challenging work situation where you have to let somebody go, how you've done it. So I just like to get credible examples. I don't know if I have a favorite interview questions. I'm not one of those where, hey, you've got a pen, show me. I don't like, those are like too cliche for me. I don't like to go do any of that. Usually, I think for me, it's irrespective of what's on paper of the individual I'm interviewing. It's the relationship and the camaraderie you can actually build with that person and how they actually come across in the interview. How they
Yeah.
actually come across in the interview, knowing that when you're going to put them in front of a customer or in front of partners, they're going to go portray themselves the same way. You need to get that level of conviction and that level of excitement there. And oftentimes, I've hired people that have more of that than someone who actually has like a paper resume example, just because I know that they would be better in a customer facing role, and I feel that way.
I agree. And that plus like how hard can I push you in terms of when we're inspecting your pipeline, you're not going to take it personally and some of those things on that side. I think you're right. It's like in the end, it's you can have everything right on paper, but not have a personality fit with that person. And it's like do you think a lot about your style? And one thing I've done, write my user manual, try to, it's like help people understand who I am because I'm unique. You probably have
Yeah.
your idiosyncrasies as well too. Like how do you assess people's fit with your style, at least for your direct?
Yeah, I think it's just telling people like how you operate, right? Like for me, it's, I'm a very low ego, no politics type of a person. I expect high rigor, high drive, high energy, and delivering of results. But I also, appreciate and want people to kind of learn from their mistakes because everybody makes mistakes, and I'm pretty direct in how I go. And my job as a leader is to make whoever I'm hiring successful, so they're ready for their next role and they're ready to actually take over my job. right? At some point where, oftentimes, in fact, there's a candidate I'm talking to right now, he basically wants to get groomed to be a CRO. So, he's asking me like, hey, what type of roles should I go look for that will make me a good CRO candidate over the next few years? Right. So based on this background, I'm kind of just giving him some advice on like what type of roles that he should actually go for and look for. That's there.
What do you think about the CRO versus the CSO titles, right? Like, I don't know, in your roles, have you also run marketing? Have you run RevOps? Because I think that's an interesting one. Some people, there's so many people like my end goal is be CRO, but they don't really understand
Yeah.
what that role is. How do you think about the nuances?
Well, I think the nuances are like a true CRO is someone who owns the entire customer journey from start to finish, not
Agreed.
just sales, but sales, pre-sales, post-sales, support, channel, like basically every single route to market. Chief sales officer is essentially a global sales leader, right? Someone who is running a big sales org globally, right, for an organization, but their remit and their what they're accountable for is just sales.
Yeah.
They don't have customer success and whatnot. So for me specifically, like with the CRO, when I was at Retool, I had everything but marketing, right? I had everything but marketing. Even when I was at Auth0 as a GM, I had everything but marketing. I actually did manage for a period of time until we hired a CMO. So yeah, that's how I've operated. But there are different things that appeal differently to different people out there. And I do think companies kind of change and morph how they think about leadership there. But that I think is the biggest difference. CRO, end-to-end customer journey, all different reps to market, pre and post sales, and then chief sales officers usually use global sales.
I like that. Yeah. It's funny. I hear the debate all the time of I'm a marketer and I won't report to a CRO. I'm like, are they a CRO or are they a CSO? There's
Right. And marketing is a nuanced function where I think it also depends on the state and the trajectory of the company and what needs to be done. Um, And again, I have no preference. I've usually seen, I've seen examples of where, you've got like a head of demand gen, you don't really have a CMO or a head of marketing, and usually that function reports up to the revenue organization. But then over time, as the companies mature, they want to get like a world-class CMO into the business for brand, PR, AR, just a bunch of strategic things, analyst relations. Then you're getting a world-class CMO, and that usually ends up being CEO peer versus
yeah.
in revenue. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. I like the president or COO. I've often reported to those who are then you're all peers. Um, Kind of wrapping up, how do you make talent that you hire successful? And how do you know if somebody's not successful?
Yeah. I mean, so I like to, like, for my direct reports, I always like to have an open conversation on what are areas that they want more exposure to in the business. Like, as an example, one could say, hey, I haven't really participated in a lot of board meetings, and I'd love to kind of understand how board meetings go, how you prep for a board meeting, which you actually discuss in a board meeting. So I'd kind of give them exposure into something like that. So it's kind of just finding out like where the gaps are of these individuals and making sure that you've got their back and you're giving them specific examples to kind of round out their career. And then also, I think sometimes we get so guilty of having one-on-ones where we're talking about the day-to-day and deals and pipeline and, close one revenue and things like that. What my EA over the years actually suggested this, where, take one-on-one out in a given month and just focus that conversation on nothing about the business, just about the individual, about their career, how it's going, do they feel like they're getting the support and what's not there. So I do think that's beneficial as well.
I like that. I've always been hey, if you want the nurture, just book a time with me on like every 2 months.
Yeah.
But then oftentimes it doesn't happen. It gets thrown away. But I like it just saying, listen, 1 out of the 4 is going to be about you. Maybe we're going to take that one as a walking or a lunch instead of that.
Yeah.
How do you find the red flags in a hire? Like what's telling you, oof, did not make a good hire here and when are you spotting those? And I guess I'm thinking mostly of your directs because I figure for the reports of your directs, that's their job and you've got to hold them accountable.
Yeah. I think like how they interact with other teams and cross-functional teams is a very, very telling sign. And usually you'll get like a ping from like a cross-functional department about the individual of how they maybe reacted in a meeting or how they reacted to a escalation or a challenging situation there. That usually is something, again, everybody makes mistakes, and you want to go out and kind of provide feedback and do coaching on there. But if it's like repetitive behavior, this person is just not getting it. I think that would be one example. One example that kind of comes to mind to me on that one particular topic is like a sales leader. I had hired a sales leader who we thought just on paper had all the right relevant experience, but for whatever reason, they could not grasp our pricing methodology in the company. So, which is like very 101 type stuff for a sales leader, right? So, and as a sales leader, you're always on calls with your reps and your teams to kind of help them navigate deals. So what happened is the field team actually lost trust in their leader that they would not invite them to calls because that person would just not do it. I mean, that was just it's just very hard to coach on that. It's very.
Oh, you mean they would not bring the calls because they'd screw pricing up?
The leader, like, the AE would not bring their sales leader in on the call because they were not saying the right things, right? And that happened once or twice, and that's just hard because, as a account executive, you actually look to your leader to help you navigate that deal, to actually help kind of bridge that gap and provide executive alignment. And if you can't trust your sales leader to come in and actually help you, that's a big, big telling sign. So that was one just really bad example where we had to kind of part ways with the individual, just because, they just could not establish that level of credibility. And to me, like, once you lose faith and trust of the people that are reporting to you, and they don't, have a belief and conviction that you're going to be able to help them navigate that, it's very hard to trust and get back.
I think that's fascinating. Maybe a tangential question, but I've had a lot of, as running RevOps, I often buy a lot of tools, and I've seen CEOs try to insert themselves on calls with me.
Yeah.
Those always seem like really red flag. I mean, like, there are times when you as a sales team absolutely wants to bring a CEO there.
Totally.
But that CEO of like, I see you're on that call, I'm going to hop on that call, seems like every single time it's gone bad. I mean, I can tell you some just horror stories of CEOs trying to do the demos themselves. So I'm curious, like, is that a red flag?
That's a red flag. Yeah. I mean, I think you want to really kind of establish swim lanes and where you want to leverage the CEO and when. That's just really, really important, not only for just everyone's sanity, right? And again, my philosophy there is if I'm making a critical hire, like on my leadership team that's a direct report to me, I probably want to have the CEO part of that interview process, right? But to your example, if you're buying a off-the-shelf tool on what it is, the CEO should probably trust the team members who are actually going to be using the tool for their judgment and their call on what to actually bring into the business versus kind of dictating what should be brought in or what not from a system standpoint.
I'll tell you a story offline on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be funny.
Well, wrapping, our favorite closing question is kind of, who was your best hire you ever made and why? You don't have to name them. We love it if you do. It's great. But it's just fun to always reflect on who that, especially given how you're great at bringing these people along in their journeys too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one kind of relevant example would be during our time at Auth0 when we kind of transitioned from like a classic CSM function to a technical account management function because we wanted more of a technical post-sales organization because we were catering to developers. The person we actually hired during the time of that transition and really the blueprint they actually brought to the table was like super, super helpful. And that was like one hire that I think was a game changer for us over the years. That was definitely good. And then, our marketing organization at Auth0 was like the best of the best, the best of the best. And what we had to go build out, everything from, people who look after the self-service funnel all the way to enterprise and the way we did annual planning with RevOps. Those were like other two examples that kind of come to mind too.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I have a lot. There isn't just I wish I could give you one favorite, but I've had the fortune of just leading a lot of just great teams. And my philosophy is you're only as successful as the team you build and the team that's around you, right? So it's just super, super important. And I'm a big fan of, assembling a world-class GTM team that allows you to scale and grow and win.
I couldn't agree more. It's like, you learn that as you get older in your career. It's not your performance, it's the performance of the team you lead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you. It was a real pleasure talking about this.
Yeah, it was fun.